Hope you're all doing well. I am Sarah, the head of search at Venn, and I'll be talking you through some of the basics of how you can use GA4, how to actually wrap your head around starting to look at the things that you need, and why you might be seeing different things than in GA3/UA. So what I will do is I will start my presentation. Please don't feel like you have to stay for the whole thing. This is a recorded session, so we will send you a link to this later on, or you can just come back to this specific link that you had for the event and you'll be able to click and see the entire session. And you will also get the slides, so if you do forget anything, you'll be able to go through those in there. To start us off, I thought it'd be really nice if we talked about why it's so much different than UA, essentially. I think a lot of us know GA4 is a different platform. It is supposed to be an evolution of what we already had. It doesn't necessarily work well, as we all know. And I appreciate a lot of you guys are here because of that. So we are going to walk through it a little bit step by step in a more of an intro session. If you do have more questions or you feel like some of the knowledge was maybe too basic and you're a bit more of an advanced user, you can book in time with me separately and we can have a one-to-one to talk about it. So if there's anything that you already know, just forget that slide. You're welcome to tune out for that specific section and then just listen to things that matter to you most. I think the biggest thing that we want you guys to take away from this is to think about the fact that although GA4 might be a little bit scary and it might be a little bit confusing to use, it isn't actually that hard as long as you have it set up the way you want it to be set up. So first things first, what is the difference? I think the biggest thing that we need to think about and remember is that the difference is just in how they actually show us the data. There's a lot of changes in things like primary users. So what you guys know as a users used to be just anyone who visited the website. It was a person or whatever it might be. Whereas now a user is someone who's actually engaged. So that is someone who has spent more than 10 seconds on your website. There's a difference in how it looks at traffic. So traffic might be users and then users new and return, which is also separated out. It just looks at it differently. It looks at conversions differently. So we all know goals. We used to love our goals. And now we have an event and a conversion, which are not actually the same thing. Whereas a lot of the interactions across your website will be counted as an event. So it's important to understand what do I actually want to look at as a conversion and how can I actually focus on it and track that rather than seeing all of these events where people just ping-ponged around my website. One of the biggest changes that I think quite a lot of people were thrown off by was also the engagement. So bounce rates used to be just counted based on someone came on your website, left immediately, or it could be that they were on your page for a little bit longer, but didn't perform any actions, and then they were automatically used as a bounce because they just left. Whereas now it doesn't actually count it that way. It gives them the 10 seconds, and if they stayed on a page or haven't moved anything around for those 10 seconds, it's still counted as an engaged session, so it won't actually count as a bounce instantly, which means that some of you might have seen that your bounce rates are actually a lot healthier because it's seeing more engagement and it's counting it as a healthy kind of, interaction with your website. One of the things that we've also noted, which is a bit of a nuance, if you will, is there's quite a lot of thresholds on all of the data that we have. It's not very helpful, particularly because the way that Google looks at it is every interaction across your website is seen as an event. So if someone scrolls down a page or simply clicks to another one or even stops to look at a picture, it is seen as some sort of event, and that counts towards your kind of threshold for how many events you can have. Which means it starts sampling your data. So we will not show you all of your data. And I think particularly recruitment agencies who have a large volume of users and a large volume of traffic on their website are suddenly seeing a lot less under, smaller numbers, smaller conversions, smaller events. And it's a bit scary because you think, where has all of my traffic gone? But essentially, you've got a threshold put on how much you can actually see. There are some ways around it, exporting data to BigQuery, exporting data in and out. It doesn't always work. It is a bit more complicated and is more for advanced users, but it is something they have put in place just because the servers and the way that they kind of collect all the data has put a strain on what they're actually able to do. it is a bit frustrating, but that is unfortunately where we are with them at the minute. It also comes down to how the data is shown to you. So in UA, you used to see it within 4 hours. Now it takes up to 72 hours for the data to be shown. You might also have things like, what time do they actually have the session done? So for example, if someone did a session close to midnight in UA, when it goes past midnight, it suddenly starts a new session. So one user would count as 2 sessions, whereas now GA4 just keeps it as 1 session. So it is a little bit smarter, but it does mean that because of a continued session and changes in UTM tracking and other bits and pieces, you are going to see less users naturally. So that's something to keep in mind and maybe not worry about so much if you do notice it within your actual specific account. So to get more into how we're actually going to be using it, feel free to log in and follow along if you've got a second screen and if you want to do that. If we are going a little bit too fast, like I said, you can go back over and see it yourself again later at your own pace, but feel free to just follow along and see if you can kind of do some of the things that we're talking about, or at least trial it out and see how it works out for you. So the first thing that you need to understand is whether your script has actually been implemented. So that is, how is your code added to your website? Have you got a Google Tag Manager code in there and it's pulling in the tag? Have you got an actual Google tag in there from GA4 itself? A lot of people forget that it's not called a tag, so it isn't necessarily a script that used to be the universal script, but it is all in there. So what we've done in here is you'll also have a link to this at the end of the session. It's just have a look at Tag Manager, have a look at GA4, and have a look at their help docs to see, okay, how has it been added to my website? Has it been added correctly? Am I using it the right way? Am I doing what I need to do with it? If you're a Venture client, it's a little bit easier. It's just in your site settings. If you click on site settings, you'll be able to see it, the header script and the footer script instantly. So you can just very quickly check, is it in my website? Can I have a look at it? Can I have a look at what's going on with it? Once you've done that, all you have to do is log in and start playing with GA4. I think the first thing that I wanted to talk about is, what are we actually tracking? What are we looking at? What are the events and conversions? What's the difference between them? The best way to think about it is, an event is just an action performed on a website. It could be pretty much anything. It could be a scroll. It could be the first time they've visited your website. It could be something that they've clicked just to look at. It isn't actually something that you can action. Whereas the conversion is in a commercial opportunity. Is it a job application? Is it a contact form submission? Did someone upload their CV, sign up to a newsletter? It's an actual actionable thing that you can take as a potential lead or something of commercial value. And what you need to do is just make sure you set them up. I think the biggest thing that people have done, and we've seen quite a lot of, is when you've migrated over to UA, it automatically moved over quite a lot of your goals and tried to set them up as events. It isn't always done correctly. So the way you need to just do it is go into your data display option in your left-hand panel to look in your admin panel and have a look at, well, what goals have I actually moved over, and are they set up as events? Are they still in there? Am I tracking the things that matter to me? On this note, make sure you're looking at the right view. It has changed. So for example, when we first started putting together this webinar about 6 weeks ago, we had a very different view to what we actually see now, because Google's continuously changing the interface. So what used to, be kind of a clunky admin panel where you had to look around for lots of things is actually now a lot easier to use, but the naming convention can be a little bit more difficult, so you have to know what you're looking for. In this instance, you're just looking for data display and you're looking at events and conversions. The nice change that they have made is that when you've added an event or something that matters to you, you just toggle the conversion. You don't actually necessarily have to go in and add it separately as a conversion as you had to do it before. Once you've done that, you need to have a think about what you're actually tracking. What is it that I want to know? What am I looking for? We as Venn have a few things that we always believe that you should track, and we've kind of highlighted here for you guys, that you need to start with your candidate-facing things. So job application, CV upload, registration for website, if you have the option to register. It is quite important that you have those in there. It is for that kind of candidate focus and candidate lead gen, to understand who is actually coming into your website. You should be tracking that. Sign up for a newsletter is a bit of one that you can use for both, because obviously you might have some candidate content, you might have some client content. So it's just to have that one in there. And then finally, contact us, download, and submit vacancy are probably going to be more client facing. So those would be more of your lead gen. I appreciate submit vacancy is a bit of an odd one. Not everyone might have that. And if I'm being completely honest, who's going to upload a vacancy if they haven't actually spoken to you before. So this might be more for kind of recurring clients, and they've just got another one dropping in there. But it's important that you track those. The easy way to do it is just add in a configuration. You click, add an event. You just have to make sure that you track it on the correct things. So we, for example, really recommend that you use thank you pages. It's very easy to use. It's not going to be difficult for you to set up. So understanding forms and clicks, HubSpot has form IDs, for example, so you need to know how to track that kind of form. If you use a thank you page, it's also an opportunity to use it as an upsell. So as an example, we've got here one of our clients who have added a lot of different things onto their thank you page. So if someone completes an action, they get a nice button that you can, go back to the homepage or go to one of our specialism pages if you want to read about more of what we do in this specialism, or have a look at other downloads that we have. It's a really nice way to keep users on your website and get more out of them and show more of what you actually do. So don't forget that this is a nice opportunity to get that click through and get more conversions out of it, rather than just having a generic, thanks for downloading, thanks for adding your application. Once you have done that, all you have to do is make sure that you track it. You can also track other notable events. These may not be your conversion events. They might just be things that you want to know on the basis of you're interested in understanding, what do they click on your page? Do they log in if they already have an account? Do they share, different views? Do they start videos and complete them if you've got videos on your page? Those are also things worth tracking and understanding so that you can know what the behavior of all of your users is across the website. What I would say is the thing that might be a little bit difficult, and I've seen quite a lot of our recruitment agencies struggle with, is the naming convention. So it's not exactly user-friendly. You might have things on there like page location, which naturally you may or may not think that it is an actual URL. It's not as simple to use. It is a bit difficult. So we have also added a link to their help doc, which explains what the different parameters are. So you are actually tracking the correct things and you've set them up correctly. It's always good to understand, am I looking at the right parameters? Do I care about clicks, URLs? Have I got a specific page or specific video that I want to track? It's kind of understanding all of that, which can be a little bit overwhelming. So make sure that you're using as many assets as you can to track everything and have a list of what you want to do and organize what you're actually trying to track and what for. Once you have done all of that, it's just making sure you have your events and conversions in place. Like I said, it is pretty much a difference of what is my user behavior, understanding my audience, or seeing how people engage with my website and what do they click, where do they scroll, how far do they scroll, versus an actual opportunity. Have they downloaded something, applied for a job, or maybe contacted us because they would like to recruit with us. So it's always good, again, to have that organized and have a look at how can I actually properly track what is an event and what is a conversion so that I know what I'm doing. Now, don't worry about using a conversion because it will still show up as an event, but it is worth making sure that you kind of separate them out and don't tag everything as conversions. There isn't necessarily a limit on conversions. I know we had a limit on goals. There were only so many that you could track. And once you've added one, you couldn't necessarily add more because it kept the limit and it kept the other ones in there. You can archive it. You can do that in GA4. So it's actually quite nice. You can delete things, you can archive it. There isn't necessarily a limit onto what you can do. But again, it comes down back to that data threshold. You don't want to overwhelm your website with loads of things to track. If it's not a commercial opportunity, it's probably not worth tracking as a conversion and understanding what you're doing with it. Google themselves aren't always sure how they're doing things. We're always in constant contact with them, and they themselves are still admitting that they're working on this platform. So keep it as simple as you can. Don't overwhelm yourself with difficult things to track. Now, the one thing that we have been doing a lot of, and we encourage quite a lot of people to do, is use Tag Manager. Now, not everyone uses Tag Manager. I think back in the day, it used to be like the difficult thing that nobody wanted to do. But actually now with GA4, a lot of people are finding that it is a lot easier to use. There's a lot more that you can do with it. It's a little bit more user-friendly, so the naming conventions are not as difficult. There isn't as much that you have to worry about. It's just easier for people to have a click at, people to add the things that they want to add. And the nice thing about it is that you don't necessarily have to have loads of knowledge on how to use it. You just need to make sure that you've set things up correctly and it's easy to test and debug for you. So again, the same as we've done with your analytics account. If you do want to log into your tag manager now and have a look at how that could potentially work for you, what I would say is if you haven't had any experience with tag manager, all it will do is it will ask you to create an account. If you do already have one set up, it'll just show it to you and it's named as container. It is a bit weird on that side of things, but you just have to click your website. Once you see your website name, you should be able to click on it. If you haven't done it before, it's fairly easy to set up. All you have to do is click on, create an account. You just have to put your company name in, choose the country where you actually operate. So for global websites, I would say choose the main country where you operate. You don't necessarily have to have your office there, but if you have a large portion of your audience coming from a specific place, make that your default. It will still give you data from all of the countries. So I know quite a lot of people were worried that if I do that, I'm blocking out loads of traffic. That isn't the case. So you still will see everybody. Put your entire website URL in and then choose web as your target platform. You can track other things. It's the same as GA4. You could also tag, apps or anything else. Most of us won't have an app because we don't run shops, but if you do have an app for some reason, you can also create a separate container for your app if you are interested in also tracking that. Now, connecting it and setting it up is a little bit more, I don't want to say complex, but it kind of requires you to know a few things. So all you have to really know is, do you know how to find your measurement ID? So your measurement ID is your actual kind of GA4 name. Now, it isn't the same as the ID that you see in GA4 to tell you what the account ID number is. It's not the same number. So with UA, it used to be that, which made it a lot easier. Unfortunately, with GA4, you have to understand where to get it. So again, you go into your admin panel, go into data collection and the data stream section, and it will show you a measurement ID. Make sure you also copy over the G. If you don't copy over the G, it won't understand it as a measurement ID. It needs to be exactly the same. And then you just have to create a new tag in Tag Manager. It's fairly easy to do because there's just a button that says create new tag. Click the button, add your new tag in there. My only advice on this one is make sure that you put it to set off on all pages. I've seen some people who just do it on some pages or are worried about consenting and all those bits and pieces. Put it on all pages so it fires everywhere. And then make sure that in advanced settings, you choose the option that says no additional consent required. The reason why is because for some reason, it will automatically go to not set, and in certain cases, it will ask for additional consent from people, which isn't very helpful. It won't give you the full data. It's almost like a cookie banner, but from Google itself. So just make sure you set it to you do not need any additional consent. If you've done that, it'll just take you straight to what you want to do, and it's fairly easy to use. Once you have connected that, it will show it. It used to be called GA4 configuration. It's now called just a Google tag. So it is treated as a normal tag. It should fire on all your pages. If you click on preview on a top right-hand side, it will show you what it looks like as a user if they were to try and do something on your website now. It works almost automatically. So if you have added the actual tag manager code into the script of your website, so it needs to sit in your header and then it has a second script for your footer, it will show up immediately, which is the nice thing because you don't need to publish out your website. You don't need to publish any changes. It just works instantly. And that same goes for any tag or trigger that you add in there. Once you have done that, you kind of have to work backwards. So a lot of people go straight in with their tags, which is the way that even Google documents work. I personally find it a lot easier to start with triggers because a tag will not work without a trigger. So you need to plan out and map out all of your trigger. Now, what we've done is there's a document that we use internally. It's just a very easy way to plan out all of our triggers, tags, events, and conversions. At the end of the session, we will share it with everybody. So you'll just get a little nice Excel spreadsheet to help you map out all of the things that, what thank you page is it going to, what is the name of this trigger and the tag and event and conversion. That will help you map it out so that you are sure on what you're doing because it can get a little bit confusing. The nice thing about it is there isn't much you need to know. All you need to do is click page view. So if you were working off of, thank you pages, or as Google calls them, confirmation pages, all you need to know is the URL of that page. If you know the URL on that page, you just click, you want to add a new trigger, choose an easy to use name. Is it thank you page for a job application, for example? Just add that name in there so it's easy for you to remember. Make sure you set it to page view, click that you want some page views. So I've seen people set it to all page views. So that isn't the case. You want to do it to some pages because you want to be able to choose the page URL option equals and then your URL. That's all you have to do. Once you have done that, all you need to do on that end is just create a tag to go with it. Now, this is where it can get a little bit more complicated because you have to make sure that the way you're naming things is exactly the same in GA4. So if you are going to add things into GA4 separately, the names have to be the same. Otherwise, Google just won't connect the two. So make sure that you've put in that it's an event. Just click the GA4 event option. Make sure that you put in your GA4 in there. It'll give you a nice little drop down. So as long as you remember that what your actual tag looks like, you just choose it from the drop down and then put in the event name. Now, the bit ugly thing about GA4, everything is lowercase and there are no spaces, so you have to put underscores into it. It's a bit clunky, it's not very pretty, but that is the way they have set it up. So just give it some sort of name. We as a standard, we always put VD at the start of everything so that our clients know that it has been set up by us. So VD Venn Digital. You don't have to do that for yourself. You can put the brand name or you don't have to. Just give it a unique name that you will remember. Whether that's job application, whether that's, contact form A or B, something that you will remember exactly what it actually leads to without having to constantly check what URL you've put in there. Once you've done that, it'll give you an option to pick a trigger, and then that trigger that you have just created, just pick it off of the list, connect it, and that's it. That is you done. Again, as I said, the nice thing about it is it connects to your website instantly, so it will work. The thing that won't work instantly is how GA4 shows it on their front end side. So if you go into real time, for example, because that's the best way to test it, you'll fill out a contact form or you'll fill out a job application to test it to see if it's gone through, you will see the tag firing. So you will essentially see that happen. But what you may not see is that actually happening in GA4 in real time. Now, like I said, there is a bit of a lag with data. It is something that Google is actually aware of themselves. And ironically, I had a call with them this morning about it, and they're just not able to fix it every single time. So they themselves don't know the nuances as to why it sometimes shows, other times it doesn't show instantly. So, watch this space. We are going to work with them until we get them to find us an answer, but it may not show instantly. So don't freak out if you don't see it right away. If the tag is firing and you are aware that it's firing and you can see it in debug mode, then you're fine. The data is there. It's just not showing in the actual panel in GA4, which is quite a big frustration, but unfortunately, they haven't found a way to give us some sort of an answer as to how we can fix these things. Now, once you have done that, it's just whether or not you want things to be a conversion. So this is where you would go back to your GA4 panel. Once you're in GA4, you go into your event section in that kind of data panel we talked about previously in your admin, and you will see all of the different kind of events that you've added in. So every tag that you've added in, whatever you named it, will show up as an event in that panel, and you just need to toggle it to say, yes, this is a conversion. So that's all you need to do from that end of things. It might take a couple of hours for things to show up in there, but usually it does show up pretty instantaneously, so you shouldn't have to wait. You should be able to see them fairly quickly. Once you have done that, it's just making sure you have all of your triggers and tags in place. Now, we recommend using a tag manager for a few reasons. One of them is because it is just a little bit easier to use. So the naming conventions are just a bit more user-friendly. It will have things like, page view, page URL, rather than, location or something that might be a bit more obscure. But it also allows you to put a lot more things in there. You don't want to overwhelm your website with lots of header scripts and codes. And I know this is going more into the technical and not necessarily GA4 kinds of things, but you don't want to slow down your page by adding loads of additional HTML code in there. Whereas if you use GTM, you can just put one code in there, and within that one code, you can put loads of stuff against it. So two things that we always recommend is making sure that your cookies are actually done through GTM, because it allows you to connect it in there, control it. You can test and change things without having to constantly republish things on your website. You can just work easily in GTM, and again, it instantaneously updates. So as long as the tag is in your website, you can work away and test without having to constantly publish things. But it also helps you to have that one script that tracks more. So one of the things that we really recommend that people look at, for example, is not just your cookies, but Microsoft Clarity. It's basically like Hotjar, but it's a free version of it. It's a very, very cool way to track how users behave on your website. Knowing how you want your website to look or what your business goals are is great. That is the biggest piece of the puzzle. But understanding how users interact with your website is probably next level. That is where you all need to get to know, okay, I think this is what my users need, but I'm going to actually track to see, what do they want? Are they actually clicking on the things that I think are important, or are they interacting with something else? Have I got redundant sections on my page? Have I got things on my page that maybe they think are clicks but are not clicks? So Clarity has this really cool thing called rage clicks, and it actually tracks people getting very angry and like consistently clicking on things or moving things around because they think it's a click or because they think it's supposed to do something and it's not, and they get frustrated. So it's really good to understand and use Clarity to see the different pages and what we do. And as you can see, it also tells you heat maps, which is something that Hotjar knows. I know most of you will be using Hotjar. Again, Clarity is free. It's probably a lot better to use. If you're a Venn client, we set you up on it immediately. So as part of your go live, we would set up your GA4 GTM for you, but we will also set up your Clarity for you. So if you are ever wondering, well, what's Clarity doing? Reach out to support or reach out to one of your strategists, and we can always let you know, this is the data that we see because you are all automatically set up. It's also nice to use your cookies through it. So like I said, it's easy to test. So you can see this is our cookie banner here, and it is pulling through because of GTM. Now, understanding standard reports. So I think this is why we are all here, is to understand, I've got all this data, it looks completely different. Now we all know that it's tracking differently. It looks completely new to some of us. You might find that you actually had a big loss of data. There are some websites that suddenly have a lot more views or sessions. It can be a little bit confusing. So, a few things that we've noticed is that there's been a big drop in sessions, for example, but it's simply because sessions are counted completely differently. We don't have new and returning users anymore. We have users and then traffic, which is a bit confusing to quite a lot of people because it also tracks things differently. So what we'll do now is we'll go through some of the basics of why it's different and how you can set it up so it's a little bit easier for you to use. Now, the first thing that you want to think about is your report snapshot. Now, most of GA4, and this is quite common knowledge, is basically set up for e-commerce. They sort of forgot, a lot of us have service-based businesses. We don't use e-commerce. Now, you may be selling, you might have a hoodie that says Recruitment Rocks. So if you do have a shop, I suppose this isn't going to be for you, but most of us will not have a shop. We will not be selling hoodies. It might be a nice revenue opportunity, but we're just not doing it. So the monetization section of the website or of the GA4 tracking and reporting is essentially redundant to us, but they do have a tool in there that is called Business Objectives, which is more for platforms that are service-based. Now, we've noted quite a lot of our clients aren't actually using this. They're not aware that you can turn it on. It's very easy to move things around because you can completely change your reporting view. So it's worth looking at, okay, in my GA4 panel, have I got monetization in there, or have I got business objectives? Have I actually made my panel ready for me, or am I still looking for e-commerce information? Is it still showing purchases, for example, and you constantly see a big fat zero there because you just are not having any purchases happen on your website? So always check, first things first, check if you actually have it set up for you specifically. Now, the biggest thing that you will note is the life cycle. This is the one that we kind of look at the most. It's got your engagement, it's got your acquisition, it's got all of those things in there that tell us how a user interacts with our website. It's a very important section that I feel quite a lot of people are missing out on because they don't actually understand that there's a difference in how the data works. So it's really important that you know what it actually means. So like I said, user activity over time, what does that mean? It is basically how they were on interacting with your page during that session. So that is over time within that session. User stickiness is the one that tells you whether the engagement of active users was changing in short versus long-term uses of your website. So these are users that come back to your website. If you want to look at who your returning users are, that won't actually be in here. So I think that's the thing that throws a lot of people off is, oh my God, like I'm looking at my users, the numbers are a lot lower. That is because your users are actually new users. So these are not people that are constantly on your website. If you want to look at, well, who are my actual new and returning users, you have to look at traffic acquisition. So make sure you remember to use those two differently. User acquisition for new users, traffic acquisition for new and returning. There isn't currently a way to split them out, unfortunately, but it gives you more of a picture of what is actually happening with your website. It might be why some of us are seeing different numbers and we're just confused as to why, because it was never explained to us that they've completely changed it. When it comes to users, I particularly really like this section because it talks a lot about, who is actually coming to my website, who is interacting with me. And when I say who, I don't mean tech. This tech section, to be honest with you guys, get rid of it. You don't need it. I don't think I've ever met anybody in the service-based world who has changed an entire website because you have more users on, I don't know, Mozilla over Chrome over, Microsoft Edge. It is not a make or break information point. Is it worth knowing what your desktop to mobile split is? Sure. I will tell you right now, it's probably around 50%. It's very rare to have a different split. And at the end of the day, most users who do actually use mobile when they come to actually apply for a job or actually contact you about needing your services, they will probably just find you on their phones and then they will actually go to their desktop and perform the action. So it's not the end of the world if you don't know what the split is or if you're not tracking it properly. What you should be tracking is your audiences. Now, this is something that isn't utilized by quite a lot of us. And it's a bit surprising because there's so much that you can do with it and you can set it up in very unique ways. And we are probably going to do a separate webinar on it just because there's so much to talk about when it comes to audiences. There's so much that we can cover here. You can use quite a lot of different tools to understand your audiences and then use that data to change your website or change your marketing strategy. The biggest things that you guys need to think about is, should I be tracking more of what people do across my website? And the answer is yes. You can look at different locations and interests. Now, with interests, I'm going to caveat that you are going to have to make sure that you have turned on the option to tell Google that you're okay with having slightly less data. Now, for most of us, this is not the end of the world because we won't hit the data thresholding. If you have a very large website, so you have quite a lot of people coming to your, whether it's users, sessions, whatever it might be, it might be more difficult for you because you will hit data thresholding, and having this option turned on to get more info about your users. So this is things like, what are they searching? What are their interests? And this is what it will do is it will use their browser data, their actual Google searches, and it will use their actual Gmail data if they aren't logged in via Gmail to collect information about them and give you more insights. So what are their interests? What are the things that they don't like? What are they clicking off on? What are they searching? It will feed all of that in there. So it is a very cool tool to really drill down into getting to know them. But if you have a data threshold in place, it is a bit of a, which one do I choose? I would argue it's probably better to maybe turn this off. So if you understand your audience very well, just turn off the option so that you can see more of your data and your threshold isn't hit too fast. If you're not as bothered about the data and you're fine with having more of an estimated data threshold and estimated data within your panel, feel free to just keep the option on. It is automatically turned on for everyone. So this is something that you would have to turn off in your admin panel to just toggle it essentially. It is very interesting. You can gather quite a lot of information. I think the biggest thing that I feel like people aren't tracking is, how are my registered users behaving? How are people behaving when it comes to lead gen? There is a template in there that is for lead generation, and it will track people who are completing specific forms or who go to specific pages. So if you have specialism pages where you talk about, the services you provide or how you work within specific sectors, this is what you want to be tracking. That is your lead gen section, and this will give you a lot of demographic information about your audiences. It will tell you, what are they searching? What are they downloading? Are they returning? How are they behaving with my website? If you are working on campaigns where a lot of DNI stuff, you're doing is important to you, it's really good to understand, the gender splits of your users, maybe even age, to understand who is interacting with you. If you've got younger users coming to your website, do you need to branch out to TikTok or branch out to different forms of media that aren't necessarily going to be as heavy reliant on, written text? So it's really, really good to utilize this section and kind of look a little bit more at what you can do with it. And then finally, business objectives. So this is the section I talked about making sure that you turn on. It's really, really cool for kind of collating all of the stuff that we've just talked about. It tells you information about your audiences as long as you've set them up. So if you haven't set them up, all you're going to see is first user. And first user is basically anyone who's triggered the event of coming to your website first, is essentially all it means. So it's not very useful because you can't really do much with that data. So you want to make sure you've got it split into different audiences and then look at, okay, well, what are the demographics? What are they actually doing? It has traffic acquisition in there. So like I said, traffic acquisition and user acquisition is very useful because you can look at new and returning users. It has landing page views. So if you want to know, okay, well, how is my content performing? Which pages are struggling the most? Where do I need to put more effort into it? You've got demographic details in your brand awareness. So you can also track users who have found you by specific terms, for example. This is where you would say, okay, I want to know more information about the behavior of everyone who has returned to my website. Again, you would look at demographic details and what pages and screens they used. Again, pages and screens may not be as important to you because it doesn't really matter, what browser they were using or what specific mobile device or not mobile device they were using. It's more about your actual landing pages that you care about, but it's good to also understand where they've come from. And then finally, user behavior, so events, conversions, and knowing, okay, what have they actually done? Like, they could have performed a lot of events across your website, but if they haven't performed any conversions, is there kind of a fall and a drop within my performance of my website? Do we need to put a little bit more effort into something specifically so that we're not struggling as much to do what we want to do? If you're not sure where to actually get to objectives, it's very easy. It's going to be in your GA4 library. That is on the left-hand side. It's in your panel, so where you will see all your actual reports. At the bottom, you have the library section, and that's where you can customize everything that you're looking at. So if you wanted to get rid of the tech data because it's just not important to you, all you have to do is you look at the little squares that we've got here, click on user, and if you've clicked on user, you'll be able to edit what's actually in there, and you can drag and drop. So it's very easy. You don't have to know any naming conventions or go into great details. You can just drag and drop as you go and just hit save. The same goes for the reporting review. So if you want to remove monetization out of lifecycle, remove it, save it, leave it there. And then if you click on create new collection, that is where you will find this business objectives area. There's a lot more templates that Google provides. Unfortunately, most of them are for the actual e-commerce platform. So whilst we'd love to use it and we'd love to have a little bit more, unfortunately, it doesn't let you do anything with it at the minute. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so even stuck with PPC stuff. So PPC, as you guys all know, is still on UA because they haven't actually made the platform ready for PPC. So they've had to give PPC folks another whole year on UA to track their AdWords and all the other data because GA4 just isn't made, it's not ready as a platform. So if it's not ready for PPC, it's probably not going to be ready for service-based businesses for a little while, which is a little frustrating, but it's just making sure that you guys are aware of it and think, okay, there's little tools in there, but what little tools can I utilize to make it a little bit easy? Like I said, it's a drag and drop system. It's very easy, and there's quite a lot of templates within here. So feel free to click around. There's always little question mark toggles that you can have a look at. And like I said, always feel free to get in touch with us because we can help you set this up as well. But it's just really, really good to make sure that you do that. And then, understanding your data. I think the biggest thing is preparing what you actually want to track. Too many people are focusing on things that are just vanity metrics. I think the biggest mistake that we see with a lot of people, especially in the recruitment industry, is still reporting on metrics that don't necessarily convert or don't necessarily model anything. They're just not commercially viable. So what you want to make sure is that you're thinking about the overall picture of what you want to achieve. So what are you actually tracking? Do you know what your business objectives are? I don't think any business's objectives will be, I want to increase my organic traffic. you don't go in front of a board and say, I want to, our traffic is increasing in organic. That's not what matters. At the end of the day, it's conversions. And actually, if you do your things well, you might have a lot less traffic, but more people are converting. So it's actually having a think about what are we trying to achieve? Do we need more, leads? Do we need more clients coming to our website? Which I know most of us at the minute, that's what we're kind of pining for, is that we need more people. Well, have you got the content? Do you have the things to actually give to them? Are you ranking for those terms and high intent searches that matter to those kinds of users over job related searches, which are more candidate focused? Are you thinking about, have I explained my services well enough? Do I actually have landing pages where all of that information sits? Have I got a client offering prospectus that they can download? Those are the kind of things that you want to think about. So once you know your objectives, and say your objective is, I need to understand more about what my, I need more clients, we need more clients to the specific sector. We want to increase more work within a specific sector. Know the difference between vanity and commercial. It does not matter if loads of people are coming to your website to have a read about your Christmas party, or if they're coming to your website to have a read about what services you offer within a specific sector. Because if they're all coming and they're not getting in touch with you, it's just a vanity metric at the end of the day. What you need to be tracking is, are they downloading? Are they contacting? Are they filling out the forms? What are they actually doing? And on the back of that is having those assets. Have you got the downloads? Have you created anything that's worth sharing with them? Anything that they will want to stick around for, and make sure that they perform that conversion? Have you got enough forms set across your website? I think a lot of people are scared to put too many forms, or they put loads of forms, but there's no buttons leading them to it. So it doesn't matter if you have a form at the bottom of your page or the bottom of your home page, because if there's no button at the top to take them to it, they will most likely never go there. So that's where you need that clarity data and that understanding of your audiences, so that you know whether they've actually gone there to perform that action. If you know no one's scrolling to the bottom of the page, just don't put your tracking form there. Make sure it's at the top. Make sure you have buttons that take people to it if you don't want to put it at the top. And then finally, does your business actually report back on the things that you've told them? So one of the things that we find that a lot of users don't do is rely so heavily on this GA4 data, but we don't actually look at the specifics. So say all of your tracking is perfect. You've got everything exactly how you wanted it. Who cares if you can see that there's been 15 conversions last month? Because it just says conversions. You can look at the form it was performed to, but you don't actually have the details of it. So what we tend to encourage quite a lot of our clients to do is go into your actual CMS or CRM, whatever you're using to track. Within Venn, you're able to see all the form submissions, all of the job applications. You can see it on a month-by-month basis. It creates a little graph for you. Why are you not reporting to it? Why are you not downloading that data and going to your sales team and going, okay, well, I see all of these people have actually come through the website. What have you done with it? Have they actually gone into something? Have they actually been viable leads? Am I getting the correct people to reach out to us via the website? Am I reaching the right people? So make sure you're actually reporting back on it. And kind of once you start putting the question back on them, it makes them realize that, A, the work you're doing actually matters. I think a lot of marketers get frustrated because we don't always know what happens to the leads that we bring in. It's very difficult because you feel like you've done all this work for a website, you've put all of this effort in, but you don't actually know if the performance is actually bringing anything to the business. But if you start asking those questions, if you start chasing the sales team and saying, I can see all of these emails, I can see all of these form submissions, what's happened to them, it puts the pressure back on them. And it kind of does give you that boost that, hey, actually, I have done something, I'm doing something a bit more, and now I can start reporting back on it. And that again puts it back on that commercial thinking instead of those vanity metrics where people are like, oh, have we had high bounce rates? At the end of the day, who cares? As long as people are converting, it doesn't matter what's happening. What matters is you're converting and you're bringing the right people to your website, and those right people turn into really, really hot deals. So I think the thing that we want you guys to take away from it, and I think we've got a couple questions, so we'll have a look at those in a minute as well. If you've got any other questions, drop them in the chat now. One of the biggest things I want everybody to think about is, what am I actually tracking? Map it out. Map out the things that you're working on, map out what you're trying to track, and then define whether it's an event or a conversion. Is it just a vanity thing? Do I just want to know how many people watched my video? That's probably not going to convert anything, but I want to know how many people have done it versus an actual commercial thing. So somebody's contacted you because they are a lead and they want to work with you, or they've applied for certain jobs. So make sure you start defining that, and then set up your goals and triggers to measure that. Make sure you're measuring those recruitment focused metrics. Is it a download? Is it a job application? Is it a submit CV? Is it a newsletter sign up? Make sure you're tracking what matters for recruitment and not necessarily that would matter for an e-commerce platform. Update your reports view. I feel like that's a very easy one that all of us could do now. Just make sure you're looking at the right things. Don't overwhelm yourself with loads of metrics you will never report on. You don't need to see purchases. You don't need to see shopping cart information because you don't have that on your website. So just remove the distractions from your reports so that you focus on what actually matters. And then just start learning from it. Start learning from all the data that you're seeing, particularly the audiences. I feel like that's a very important one to really, really dive into, and not a lot of us are utilizing it correctly. And at the end of the day, if you are very stuck with any of it, you can always get in touch with us. I know that Meg is going to add my Booksy in here, so you can actually book a session with me, and we can talk one-on-one about your specific account, and we can help you figure out, how to set things up correctly for your specific business.